Okay. All righty. This is not ESPN's 30 for 30, but it is, however, my 98 for 98. The 98 seasons in the history of the New York Football Giants. Going to try to get it done in 98 days. Probably not going to happen. However, I do want to get it done. Definitely before the beginning of the season, which starts at September 10th. So we're forging ahead. We're into the 50s. We're at the 1952 NFL season, which just happened to be the 28th season in the history of the New York Football Giants. 28th season in the history of the Giants, 33rd season in the history of the NFL. The Giants started in 1925. The NFL started in 1920. This was also the 22nd season, and probably nobody's ever going to catch him. And the second to last season for the Giants head coach Steve Owen. He has been the coach of the Giants since 1931. Now he will probably never be surpassed as far as years being coached. Steve Owen, 23 years. So, 1953 will be his final season. The wheels kind of come off. And so 1953 is his last season, but it was 23rd season. And he also has, I believe, it's 150 wins. It's going to be very difficult for anybody to pass either. You figure, I'm just saying, Brian Daboll, right, would average 10 wins a season, which, a little difficult to do. If he did it for 15 seasons, he would just tie him. So it's going to be very, very difficult. Plus, considering the fact that nobody's, even made what do you got? Tom Coughlin, I guess, would be the only other one who's had double digits in seasons as far as coaching. Because after, all the Giants coaches before Steve Owen, nobody coached more than 2 seasons before Steve Owen. After Steve Owen was Jimmy Lee Howell. He coached from 54 to 60. 61 to 68 was Ali Sherman. 69 to 73 was Alex Webster. Bill Arns Parger was 74 to halfway through 76. The other half of 76 through all of 78 was McVay. Perkins was 79 to 82. Bill Parcells was 83 to 90. Reeves was Ray Hanley was 91, 92. Reeves was 93 to 96. Fossil was 97 to 03. So then you got Coughlin was 04 to 15. So Coughlin's the only other coach in Giants history who has double-digit amount of seasons being coach of the Giants. It's difficult. New York's a tough market. The fans, everything's going, everything's great when you win, but, when you have a bad season, couple bad seasons, things don't go your way, things can get very, very difficult. Things can get very, very draining. Now, obviously, as time goes by, you see a lot more coaches. It's a full-time job. Not we're not talking 40 hours a week. We're talking full-time job. We're talking, whatever, 18, 20 hours a day. I don't even know, so it's a tough job. So for anybody to try to coach more than 23 seasons, what Steve Owen did, it'd be very, very, very difficult to do. So, but anyway, so this is the 22nd season for Steve Owen. It's, as I said, once again, it's also the 28th season for the New York Giants. Now, the Giants finished tied for second place. They were 7-5. The problem is that during this season, they played down to their opponents. When they played somebody really good, they played, the Cleveland Browns won the division once again. Now, the Cleveland Browns, came from the All-American Football Conference. 1946 and 1949 was the All-American Football Conference. The Browns won the championship all 4 years. So they came into the NFL, and they're very, very good. The Browns, right now it's called the American Conference. It's going to go back to like the Eastern Division soon. But right now, there's the American Conference and the National Conference, the two different conferences. The Giants are in the American Conference. It's a little confusing because right now they're in the National Football Conference. But anyway, once the Browns came into the league, the Browns from 1950 to 55 went to the championship game every year. So the Giants were always trying to chase the Browns, and they always fell a little short. Once again this year, the Giants fell a little short. The Giants, as I said, wound up 7-5, 12-game schedule. The Browns won the division. They were 8-4. The Giants were tied with the Eagles. They were both 7-5. But as you notice, as I said, I'm going to go over is that the Giants lost to some weaker opponents. They lost one game to the Eagles, so they lost one out of their 5 losses. Only one of them was to a team who had a winning record. They lost. I'm going to go over this in a couple of minutes. The Giants lost to the Packers, who were 6-6. Then the Giants also lost 3 games to losing teams that had losing records. So that they played down to their opponents. One game, they lost 63-7. They gave up 1/4 of their defensive points in one game. The Giants, they're very, very, because of that one game, the Giants scored 234 points, which is not really phenomenal. They gave up 231. But if you consider they gave up 63 in one game. So basically they gave up like 170 points the rest of the season. They gave up 170 points in the other 11 games, which is pretty good. You tack on the 63 points in the one game, right? So, it's 1/4 of the points came from one game on defense. They were decent in the run. The passing was okay, but, they unfortunately wound up playing down to their opponents. Wound up being a very exciting season, very, very exciting season, because in the National Conference, the Lions and the Rams, they were both tied at 9-3 for the division lead after the 12 games. So they had to play a playoff game just to see who went to the championship game. So it was a very, very exciting season, the 1952 season. Unfortunately, once again, it was another good season for the Giants. They fell a little bit short. So we got the 1952 NFL season. And we got the 1952 NFL season was the 33rd regular season of the National Football League. Prior to the season, the legacy of the Dayton Triangles, the final remaining Ohio League member and the franchise then known as the New York Yankees owner, Ted Collins, sold his team back to the NFL. A few days later, a new team was then awarded to an ownership group in Dallas, Texas, after it purchased the assets of the Yanks. However, the new Dallas Texans went 1-11 and were sold back to the league midway through the season. For the team's last 5 games, the league operated the Texans as a road team, with the franchise returning to its roots as a traveling team just as they were in the 1920s when they were known as the Dayton Triangles. With then becoming the final traveling team to date in NFL history, using Hershey, Pennsylvania as its home base. One of their final 2 home games were held at the Rubber Bowl in Akron, Ohio. The other one played at the opposing team's Detroit Stadium. After the season ended, the league considered the Texans to have folded. However, all the Triangles/Texans players and assets were awarded to Carroll Rosenblum for the following year, becoming the new Baltimore Colts, keeping the blue and white color scheme and the assets of the franchise, ultimately never missing a season in some form. This left Dallas without a professional football franchise until the birth of the Dallas Cowboys and the AFL version of the Dallas Texans in 1960. Now, the AFL version of the Dallas Texans in 1960, a few years, I think 1963, I believe, they became the Kansas City Chiefs. The Detroit Lions defeated the Cleveland Browns in the 1952 NFL Championship game, and this was the last NFL season prior to the introduction of regular season overtime in 1974, that there were no ties in the regular season. All right, the draft. The 1952 NFL Draft was held on January 17, 1952 at Philadelphia's Hotel, Statler Hotel. With the first pick, the Los Angeles Rams selected quarterback Billy Wade from the Vanderbilt University. Major rule changes. Offensive players will not be called for illegal motion as long as they do not move forward prior to the snap. So they can just go, sideways or backwards. As long as you're not going forward toward they won't be called for illegal motion. The penalty for offensive pass interference is 15 yards from the previous spot, unless the result on a fourth down play is a touchback. Okay. A player who commits a obvious unfair act is ejected from the game. Then we have quite a few highlights here. A lot of highlights. In week 1, the Cleveland Browns hosted a rematch of their 1951 title game loss to the Rams, which had taken place in Los Angeles. The Rams won that one 24-17. However, this time the Browns avenged their loss from the previous season with a 37-7 win. The NFL's newest team, the Dallas Texans, played their first game, but a crowd of only 17,499 turned out to watch the visiting Giants. The Texans scored first on a pass, it was on a pass from George Taliaferro to Buddy Young, two of the few African-American players in the NFL at the time. The Giants scored the rest of the points and won 24-6. Week 3. The Giants beat the Browns 17-9. See, the thing is that the thing that kind of ticks you off is the Giants played the Browns 2 times, beat them both times. Yet they couldn't surpass them in the win total. Let's see, on week 4, the 49ers stay unbeaten with a 40-18 win over the Bears, while the Chicago Cardinals spoiled the Giants' home opener 24-23. See, the Giants lost 24-23, which I'm going to go over in a little bit. They lost by 1 point to the Cardinals, who wound up with a losing record, and the Giants were at home. Had the Giants won that one game, I'm going to go over it anyway. Let's go over it right now here. 24-23. Up. Cardinals. Yeah. Let's see here. Ollie Matson scored the game-winning 6-yard run in the fourth quarter. So, but let's see here. Yeah, well, the Giants lost by 1 point. 1 point. Let me see. Did it show kicks here? Nah, I'm just wondering if the Giants had tried to kick any field goals, maybe miss some field goal attempts, but they don't show that. They don't show that at all. So, but the Giants lost by 1 point at home to a team who wound up with a losing record. So, is it just stuff like that? They lost by 1 point because they lost at 1 point. The Cardinals wound up with a record of 4-8. Let's see here. In let's go week 7, the 49ers lost to New York 23-14, while Detroit beat Pittsburgh 31-6, and Cleveland beat the Cardinals 28-13. Both conference races were tied, with the Giants and the Browns in the American and the Lions joining the 49ers in the National, all with 5-2 records. In Dallas, only 10,000 turned out in a drizzle to watch the Texans fall to 0-7-0 and a 27-6 loss to the Rams. See, the problem was that, nobody showed up to the games. There was no very low attendance. Therefore, the Texans couldn't make any money to pay their ball players, so they had to fold. Attendance was huge back then. It was huge. And this game, it proved to be the Texans' last Cotton Bowl date and the last pro football game played in the state of Texas until 1960. After losses of $250,000 and failed attempts to get refinancing, the team's 16 stockholders surrendered the franchise 3 days later. The league took over its operations, and the remaining games in Dallas were moved. They lost $250,000. This is 1952. That was a huge amount of money back then. In week 8, the Browns had a 22-0 lead over Pittsburgh and then withstood a 4-touchdown passing attack by Jimmy Finks in the 20. Yeah, see this one right here. The Browns wound up beating Pittsburgh because of a safety. In week 8, the Browns had a 22-0 lead, then withstood a 4-touchdown passing attack by Jim Finks in a 29-28 win. A safety caused when Finks had been sacked in the end zone earlier was the margin of victory. They sacked the guy in the end zone for 2 points for the Browns, and they wound up winning 29-28. They didn't get the safety. Steelers wind up winning. The Giants would be 7-5, Browns would be 7-5, the Eagles would be 7-5. Week 9 saw a 7-way tie for the NFL's best record. 7-way tie after 9 weeks. Detroit and San Fran both won the state tied in the National. The 5-3 Rams beat the 6-2 49ers, and the 5-3 Eagles beat the 6-2 Browns. The 3-5 Bears upset the 6-2 Lions after George Blanda passed to Eddie Sprinkle with 8 seconds to play. In addition, the 5-3 Giants and the 5-3 Packers won their games. And so all the teams were 6-3. There were 7 teams at 6-3 after week 9. Unbelievable. This oddly only lasted a few days. Week 10 began on Thanksgiving Day as the Lions beat the Packers. The same day, the 09-0. This is the only victory of the whole season for the Texans. They won on Thanksgiving Day game. Thanksgiving Day. They played the Bears in Akron, Ohio. After Dallas and Chicago were both on their fields were both unavailable. They couldn't play in Dallas or they couldn't play in Chicago, so they had to play in Akron, Ohio. The Texans blew an 18-point lead, but with 34 seconds left to play, Frank Tripucka scored, and the NFL's orphan team registered its first and last win, 27-23. About 3,000 Ohioans watched this game compared to 14,800 who packed the stadium earlier that day to watch a high school game. 3,000 watched a pro game while almost 15,000 packed the stadium to watch a high school game. It just goes to show you how, the credibility of the NFL was just not there yet. On November 30th, the Rams and the 49ers, both 6-3-0, met set for the second straight week, this time in San Fran, and the LA won 34-21. The NFL had 2 other 6-3 teams, the Eagles and the Giants, both lost on the road. The Cards beat Philly 28-22, and the 3-6 Steelers, however, handed the Giants their worst defeat ever, beginning with a 91-yard return of the opening kickoff. And they wound up beating the Giants 63-7. The 3-6 Steelers beat the Giants, who were 6-3. So after that, the Browns were alone in the American race, while the Lions and the Rams were tied in the National. And in Week 11, the Browns, the Lions, and Rams won again, as did Philadelphia, but the Giants were eliminated with a 27-17 loss to the Redskins, who wound up with a losing record. In the final game of the regular season, Week 12, Detroit won 41-6 in the last NFL game for the Dallas Texans, and the Rams beat Pittsburgh 28-14, tying both for the American title at 9-3-0 and forcing a playoff. In the National Conference, the 7-4 Eagles were hoping for a 8-3 Browns loss, and Cleveland fell to New York 37-34. So the Giants beat the Browns 2 times, who wound up winning the division and going to the championship game. However, the Giants couldn't beat weaker opponents. Despite a fourth quarter comeback attempt playing against the last place 2-8 Redskins, the Eagles had a 21-14 lead in the fourth quarter. But Eddie LeBaron, a very short quarterback, he was short. He was like 5'5" or 5'6". Eddie LeBaron crossed the goal line with 18 seconds to play for Washington's only home win in 1952 and handing the Browns the conference title. So the Eagles were winning. Let's see, what did they wind up losing? What was the final score of that one? 27-21. So they were winning. Actually, I guess they were winning 21-20, and Eddie LeBaron ran across with 18 seconds to go. He scored a touchdown. The Eagles could have wound up tied. Eddie LeBaron had a 1-yard rush. So, but the Eagles had a chance, and they wound up losing to a team with a losing record. The Redskins wound up 4-8. So the Eagles had a chance. If they won, they would have been tied and would have been forced a playoff between the Eagles and the Browns to see who was going to go to the championship game. At the 1952 NFL Draft. 1952 NFL Draft was held on January 17, 1952 at Hotel Statler in New York. Selections made by the New York Yanks were assigned to the new Dallas Texans. This was the 6th year that the first overall pick was a bonus pick determined by a lottery. And with the lottery pick, the Los Angeles Rams wound up winning. They picked quarterback Billy Wade from Vanderbilt, quarterback. The Washington Post sports writer Mo Siegel later claimed that the Washington Redskins owner George Preston Marshall let him choose a late-round pick. Siegel, he said, chose Tennessee Tech's Flavius Smith to force the first black player onto the all-white Redskins. In true, Marshall likely persuaded NFL Commissioner Burt Bell to remove the choice from the official record. Smith, who did not hear the story until years later, was white. So I'm not exactly sure what the heck that means, but there was 30 rounds. Very good draft for the New York Giants because they selected in the first round. They took Frank Gifford, halfback from USC. He's a Hall of Famer. Giants Ring of Honor, Hall of Famer. They retired his number. That's why you never see anybody wear the number 16 ever again for the New York Giants. Round 2, I'll just go over the top 10. There was 30 rounds altogether, so the Giants got 30 players in this draft, 1952 draft. Round 2, the Giants took Ray Beck, a guard from Georgia Tech. Third round, Giants took Don Heinrich, a quarterback from Washington. Round 4, the Giants selected Don Manasco, an end from Texas. Round 5, the Giants took Bob Patton, a tackle from Clemson. Round 6, Jim McKenzie, a tackle from Kentucky. Round 7, Joe Walker, a back from SMU. Round 8, Billy Shipp, tackle from Alabama. Round 9, John Caston, a back from Boston University. In round 10, the Giants took Pat Knight, an end from SMU. I said, so if we look, I said the Giants, first game of the season, they played usually, as I said, so it's every video. The Giants open up their season on the road. Usually anywhere from their first 2 to their first 4 games are always on the road because they share the same stadium with the New York Baseball Giants, which is the Polo Grounds. So they want to make sure, it seems like to me, they want to make sure that this baseball season is totally over, meaning the regular season, quite possibly the World Series. So before the Giants go in there and start playing their home games and start chewing up the field and everything. So this, once again, the Giants' first 3 games were all on the road, and the Giants would win all 3 games on the road. They would wind up losing 4 games at home now. 4 home games they lost. So once again, the Giants had a chance. They just blew it. Second, it just goes to show, the second game of the season, they were on the road. That was a Saturday game. They played the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia, and who wound up with a 7-5 record. The Giants beat them on the road 31-7. Third game of the season, October 12th, on the road in Cleveland. The Giants beat the Browns 17-9. Fourth game of the season at home, they lost to the Chicago Cardinals by 1 point. So now they're 3-1. Then they had to play the Eagles again. I mean, this is the only game that they lost at all to a winning team with a winning record. The Philadelphia Eagles, Week 5, they lost 14-10. And I think, let's see here, 14-10. One of the Eagles' touchdowns was a punt return. The Eagles' first touchdown was a 52-yard punt return. So special teams did the Giants in there. I mean, had the Giants, didn't give up a punt return, maybe they win this game. They win it again. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. So the Giants lost 14-10 at home. So now they're 3-0 on the road, 0-2 at home. They go back on the road. They play the Chicago Cardinals, and they beat the Chicago Cardinals 28-6 on the road. Now the same Chicago Cardinals who 2 weeks earlier in the Polo Grounds when the Giants were home beat the Giants. So the Giants go on the road in Chicago to a team that just beat them, and they beat the Cardinals 28-6. Then Week 7, San Francisco 49ers come to town, and the Giants win that one 23-14. So now the Giants are 5-2. The Green Bay Packers, who wound up with didn't have a winner. They were tied. They were 500. They were 6-6. Not a horrible team, but not a super spectacular team. The Giants mustered up one field goal. That was the fewest points they scored all year long. They lost 17-3 at home. So now the Giants are 1-3 at home. They're 4-0 on the road. They're 1-3 at home. The following week, Sunday, November 23rd, the Giants played the Washington Redskins in Washington. The Giants would wind up winning 14-10. So now the Giants are 5-0 on the road, 1-3 at home. At home, 1-3. All right, so then the Giants, this is their only loss on the road. This is when the Pittsburgh Steelers destroyed them, 63-7. So now the Giants fall to 6-4. The Giants still have a chance, but what did them in was the next week at home, the Giants lost to the Washington Redskins. So now they lost 27-17 to Washington Redskins. So now the Giants are 1-4 at home. Giants played 5 home games. They lost 4 of them. 1-4 at home. The final home game, the Giants wound up winning, but they were at that time they had been knocked out because the Redskins. Because they're playing the Browns, but the Browns came into the game with only 3 losses. The Giants had 5 at the time. So even though the Giants won the final game in the season against the Browns at home, the Giants had been eliminated by that time. But the Giants won 37-34. So, I mean, the Giants had their chances. I mean, it's just there's no excuses. I mean, there's simply no excuse. They lost at home. They lost. They were 2-4 at home. All the teams. I mean, almost the 5 losses. Only one team had a winning record. One team had a 500 record, and 3 teams had losing records that they lost to. And it lost almost 4 out of their 5 losses were at home. The only loss was on the road. They lost 63-7. All the other, they lost 4 games at home. They were 2-4 at home, 5-1 on the road. Go figure. Doesn't make much sense, but that's the way it was. So the Giants had a chance, just fell a little bit short. All right, then we got the NFL championship game. The 1952 NFL championship game was the 20th annual championship game. Started in 1933, so 1952 was the 20th one overall. Held on December 28th at Cleveland Municipal Stadium in Cleveland, Ohio. The Detroit Lions were 9-3, were the National Conference champions, and met the Cleveland Browns 8-4, champions of the American Conference. Whoops. So they said they wound up tied. See, the Detroit Lions and the Rams were tied in the national conference. They were both 9-3. So they played a playoff game to see who went to the championship game. The Detroit Lions wound up winning the playoff game 31-21. Otto Graham led the league in passing with 2,816 yards. Dan Towler of Los Angeles led the league with 894 yards rushing. And Billy Houghton of Green Bay led the league with 1,231 receiving yards. A lot of receiving yards. So, the NFL championship game. The Lions led by quarterback Bobby Lane, running back Doak Walker, and head coach Buddy Parker, and the Browns were led by their coach Paul Brown, quarterback Otto Graham. It was the Browns' third consecutive championship game. As I said, the Browns from 1950 to 55, they went to every championship game. Let's see. It was the Browns' third consecutive NFL championship game appearance since joining the NFL in 1950. The Lions returned to the title game after 17 years. This is the first appearance for the Lions since 1935 when they beat the Giants 26-7 in the 1935 NFL championship game. The Lions finished the 1952 regular season tied with the Rams at 9-3 for the top spot of the national conference. Even though the Lions won both the meetings during the regular season, the rules of the day call for a tiebreaker. There was no, how a lot of times it is, how is the head-to-head? Well, the Lions won both head-to-head, so the Lions wound up. No, that's not the rules were back then. The record was tied. It didn't matter that the Lions beat them twice. So the rules were that they had to play a playoff game to see who go. The team's third game between each other was held at Briggs Stadium in Detroit on December 21st, which the Lions also won 31-21. Now, let's keep in mind, the Lions had to play an extra game while the Browns were home drinking Kool-Aid, relaxing, chilling, resting up. The Lions went on, played another game, and then they played the following week. They had to play the championship game on the road. However, the Lions were 3.5-point favorites in the title game, and they won by 10, 17-7. A low-scoring game. Detroit took the opening kickoff, failed to gain, and punted, with Renfro getting back 11 yards to the Browns' 41. A couple of offsides penalties were costly, but the Browns still managed to reach the 18. As Otto Graham was then tossed for an 11-yard loss, and the threat ended with the Lou Groza missing a field goal from the 25. 25-yard field goal. He's a Hall of Fame kicker. He's a Hall of Fame player, and he missed it. So, just say he makes that one. Now it's 17-10, the final score. But Detroit then moved upfield, getting to the Cleveland 30, but also failed to score when Pat Harder was short and wide with a field goal bid from 37 yards out. Punter Horace Gillum punted a short kick which rolled out at midfield, with the Lions going 50 yards in 7 plays. Lane started it with a pass to Cloyd's box for 10 yards to the 40, then ran for 13 and another first down on the 27. Lane added 9 more yards before Walker made a first down on the 16. From there, Lane passed to Bill Swiacki for 14 yards to the 3. After an offsides penalty, Lane would run the ball in for a touchdown, and it was only 7-0 at halftime. But if Lou Groza makes that 25-yard field goal, now it's 7-3, still a lot closer. And the second half started with the Browns moving steadily until they checked by David's interception. So an interception hurt him. Detroit was halted on this chance when the ball but clicked the next time when Walker broke away for the touchdown and boasted the lead. Made it 14-0, the Lions. Cleveland third quarter touchdown narrowed the lead to 7. But a defensive stand from the Lions from their own 5-yard line. So, so Cleveland got down to score a touchdown to make it 14-7. Then they got back down there again. They got down to the 5. And, I guess Cleveland went for it on 4th down and didn't want it making it. So, that's another field goal maybe they could have had. Right? So, if Lou Groza, they kick a field goal there. If they'd have missed the 25-yard field goal earlier in the first half, now it's maybe 14-13, But, so basically what kind of was the dagger in the championship game here? Pat Harter field goal sealed the victory. 36-yard field goal in the fourth quarter sealed the victory in the first Lions championship since 1935. So it was a very low-scoring game. Very, very low scoring. Let's see. Each player for the Lions got $2,274, while the Browns players each made $1,712 each, which was the highest to date. So I mean, it was a relatively close game, low scoring game. As I said, but the Giants they had their chances. They had their chances. I mean, basically, it was. They played down to their opponents. They played, what's up, Teddy? Bring back the Century Division. Yeah, that's in the 60s, baby. Yeah, you got it, brother. I remember it well. The Giants in 1952, they had their chances. Right? They lost at home. They had a 2-4 at home. They were 5-1 on the road. They lost to 3 teams with losing records. Another team they lost to had a 500 record, and then the only team they lost to was the Eagles, who had a winning record. One team they lost to with a winning record. They beat the Browns 2 times, and the Browns wind up winning the division. So the Giants had their chances. It's nobody's fault but their own that they didn't make it to the championship game. Right, the Browns lost by 10 points. I mean, if the Giants made it to the championship game, they would have hosted the championship game. Who knows? Maybe they would have won, but it was just not meant to be. So this is the 22nd season for the coach of the Giants, Steve Owen. Unfortunately, in 1953, the wheels would fall off the bus, and that would be the final season for Steve Owen as the coach of the New York Giants. So that pretty much wraps up the 1952 season for the New York Giants. I'll be back again tomorrow with the 1953 season for the New York Giants, which just happened to be the 29th season in history of the New York Giants. I'll see you then.